Hello, this is Eastern Europe Review, the program that is mainly about Belarus, Russia and Ukraine. This is a common project of Belsat TV and TVP World. My name is Sergei Pelesa. Please take a look at the stories that we have prepared for you today. African diamonds and gold for the Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenka on a trip to Zimbabwe.
I want to thank the Americans and the entire Western world for imposing sanctions against us.
First corruption, then Russia. The Ukrainian authorities are fighting on two fronts.
He kills us in the same way by stealing money from the budget that could be spent on weapons, food, drones, generators, but he puts it in his own pocket.
Used clothes are becoming more and more popular among Russians due to the war unleashed in Ukraine and Western sanctions received in response.
I love sneakers the most. Adidas, Puma, Nike.
And what's now?
Now I'm wearing what's left.
Belarusian propaganda was happy to show Alexander Lukashenko receiving an enthusiastic reception in Zimbabwe, a festive love, a stuffed lion, cheering crowds and dances. Before Zimbabwe, the Belarusian dictator visited the United Arab Emirates in a slightly more modest way. Judging by official information, Lukashenko seems to be establishing economic ties in Africa at a time when the country is suffering from Western sanctions. But it is more likely that the reason behind both trips is not the interest of the country, but the personal interest of the Lukashenko himself.
It was a very cordial reception. Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko visited his friends in Zimbabwe. He received a stuffed lion as a gift and laid a wreath at the monument commemorating those who died in the Civil Liberation War, which brought to power a paramilitary group that rules the country to this day.
These are our friends. We came over to our friends.
The regime, established by the previous president Mugabe and continued by Mnangagwa, has a lot in common with Lukashenko's regime: state monopoly in the economy, violations of human rights, or pressure on the independent press. Officially, Lukashenko came to Zimbabwe to strengthen economic ties. According to him, since 2020, Belarus has delivered more than 1,800 tractors and about 80 combines to Africa. But due to Western sanctions, ambitions have increased, and now 3,700 Belarusian tractors, 60 combines, more than 30 dump trucks, and also fire trucks are expected in Africa.
First of all, I want to thank the Americans and the entire Western world for imposing sanctions against us. Otherwise, there wouldn't be Belarusian tractors and agricultural machinery on this huge field, but American and German ones.
2 times before and after his visit to Zimbabwe, Lukashenko appeared in the UAE, where he met with the President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. According to official information, the politicians agreed on cooperation regarding trade, economy and investment. But it seems that in both countries, Lukashenko is building partnerships not so much on behalf of Belarus, but rather on his own behalf. The Emirates are not interested in Belarusian machinery. UAE investors are building housing projects in Belarus, and in exchange, Lukashenko and his associates keep their own money in the Emirates.
The so-called wallets of Lukashenko, Karichi brothers, have a company in the United Arab Emirates. After sanctions were imposed on them, they transferred all control over their Belarusian business from Cyprus to the Emirates. We know that another businessman close to the government, Alexei Aleksin, who is called the tobacco king of Lukashenko, has a company in the Emirates which was suspected of smuggling cigarettes from Belarus to Russia.
In Zimbabwe, in exchange for machinery, Lukashenko has access to mining gold and diamonds. According to the Belarusian Investigative Center, Belarus and Zimbabwe have created a joint venture for this purpose. It's partly owned by a Zimbabwean state-owned enterprise and partly by a British company. Behind this British company is Midlands Goldfields Foundation, registered in the Seychelles, which belongs to the honorary consul of Belarus in Zimbabwe, Alexander Zingman, and the son of Lukashenko's closest associate, Viktor Sheyman. The delivery of Belarusian equipment to Africa is handled by the company Avtrade, registered in the United Arab Emirates. It's owned by Zingman and it's a monopolist in this field.
The main profit from these supplies isn't received by Belarusian plants themselves, although of course they get something, but by the Avtrade company, which is not located in Belarus but offshore. The United Arab Emirates are known for many free economic zones, so various enterprises are actively registering there because they in fact pay minimal taxes or don't pay them at all.
Today, not only gold may interest Lukashenka in Zimbabwe, it can also be a source of weapons which can be delivered to Belarus, or rather to the newly created private security company Guard Service. At the beginning of January, Valery Sahashtik, who represents the United Transitional Cabinet for Defense and National Security, said that Guard Service mercenaries had been preparing for an attack on Ukraine for several months.
I would focus on commercial issues, including weapons and Belarusian agricultural machinery for delivery to Zimbabwe. Perhaps they have also discussed some contracts: gold, diamonds, valuables.
Last but not least, Lukashenka could go to Zimbabwe for his peace of mind, because it is where the Belarusian dictator can prepare his way out in case he has to run away.
Dismissals, searches and allegations. Mass purges have begun in Ukraine among top officials as part of a large-scale campaign to fight corruption. Why has a country that is at war opened a second internal front, and how has the war influenced the need to fight corruption? We will describe this situation in the next story.
Mass purges have begun in Ukraine among top officials. During only one day, the 1st of February, searches concerning various corruption cases were carried out at the apartment of the former Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Arsen Avakov, and at the residence of oligarch Igor Komoloisky. The Office of the Prosecutor General also pressed charges against 3 people involved in the scandal concerning purchasing decisions for the armed forces of Ukraine. At the end of January, the Ukrainian media published the results of an investigation revealing corruption schemes to provide food for the military. The prices for the most popular products turned out to be 2 to 3 times overpriced. In addition, the entire leadership of the State Customs Service of Ukraine was dismissed.
This is just the beginning of active actions and work that has been continuing for months in order to collect the evidence base for all these elements. And we are at the beginning of a long journey of clearing our country of people who have forgotten what honor, state and country are, and were engaged in disgrace, even during the war.
Volodymyr Zelensky, in his evening address, called the day fruitful in confronting those who even now tried to weaken Ukraine, and thanked law enforcement officers and the cabinet of ministers.
Unfortunately, in some spheres, the only way to guarantee legitimacy is to change leaders along with the implementation of institutional changes. Change as much as necessary to ensure that people do not abuse power.
The importance of the fight against corruption, against the backdrop of scandals related to fraud in the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, was also declared by the Ukrainian military, who risk their lives to defend the sovereignty of their homeland.
This is treason for us, and the perpetrator is our enemy, the same as the Russian one who has come to kill us. He kills us in the same way by stealing money from the budget that could be spent on weapons, food, drones, generators, but he puts it in his own pocket. You should get life imprisonment for this, not for 5 or 10 years, but for life.
The director of the State Bureau of Investigations has promised new anti-corruption cases. The Bureau has just begun to inform about its steps to overcome corruption at the top level, the SBI press service quotes the director.
This is the desire of Ukrainian society, so that at the moment when Ukraine is bleeding, when people are collecting billions, giving away their last money so that our armed forces are trained and armed, at the moment when our Western partners are taking their taxpayers' money and sending it to help Ukraine, we want to be sure that this money reaches its destination, the armed forces.
Such activity may be associated with the Ukraine-EU summit, which started on February the 3rd in Kiev. On the agenda are issues of Ukraine's accession to the European Union and, of course, further financial and military support for Ukraine from its European partners.
Is this just a demonstration, or are they taking corruption seriously? Both would look the same. At the moment, we can assume both, the first and the second option. It is important to keep track of what will happen next.
Corruption is one of the main factors hindering Ukraine's future as a member of the European Union. In 2021, European auditor Johan Parts stated that there are no countries in the European Union where the scale of corruption would be the same as in Ukraine. And now it is very important to ensure that the fight against corruption will be brought to an end.
Second-hand stores are gaining popularity in Russia. Many Western companies have left the country, and now the only way to buy designer clothes is at thrift stores. There is another reason for the demand for second-hand clothes: a general drop in people's incomes. Some Russians are trying to save money in this way. Others are selling part of their wardrobe in order to somehow fix the family budget. Russian factories have declared their readiness to sew clothes of the same quality as Western brands, but so far buyers seem not to appreciate such ambitions.
This is Chelyabinsk, a city on the border of the Urals and Siberia, in the Asian part of Russia. A second-hand store in the center of the city sells a variety of designer clothes from the West. The clothes and shoes are not new, but today it is practically the only opportunity to buy quality items.
If you want to order a brand, you definitely need to order from abroad. Wait 2 to 3 months or even more. We have everything in stock here. You come, look and buy. Therefore, we have a huge demand.
After Vladimir Putin started the full-scale war against Ukraine, almost all popular designer brands left Russia. Stores in shopping malls are empty or occupied by sellers of domestic brands that cannot compete with world leaders in terms of quality or assortment. There are fewer brands, this is clear to everyone. Import substitution is beginning, but the quality is not similar to those brands that have left.
The fact that the stores are closed is, of course, noticeable. I also have problems buying clothes, but I wasn't a fan of any brand. But I know from my friends that I have to order somewhere. Look for brands of Russian manufacturers. The situation has become more difficult.
I love sneakers the most. Adidas, Puma, Nike.
And what's now?
Now I'm wearing what's left. This is Saratov, a Russian city in the southeast of the European part of the country with almost 1 million inhabitants. Equipment used by a garment factory here was produced by Western companies. There are no high-quality machines for cutting fabrics, and even industrial sewing machines produced in Russia. Before sanctions were imposed, all the equipment had been bought in the West, but Russian products are still not popular. It can be seen here that half of the success depends on the brand. But now there is no one left to compete with. According to the factory, bad copies of last year's collection of Western brands will sell like hotcakes.
We are quite ready to become the second Zara. We have everything for this. It's no secret that European brands do not quite understand our mentality, do not sew according to our size range, but we are ready to do clothes for the Russian consumer.
But so far, new products are being produced at the sewing workshops in 5 copies and sent to large stores to clarify whether they will definitely be bought. Meanwhile, the shopping of Russian fashionistas has changed dramatically. They carefully study the assortment of second-hand shops. The import of such goods has not been subject to Western sanctions.
If we used to go to big stores and malls, now it makes no sense to go there for the sake of 1 or 2 departments. It's not interesting. When I come here, I know that there is a large selection and I always can find something for myself.
Buyers say that the most important thing is the price. Against the backdrop of high inflation, many people cannot afford to be spending on clothes as much as before.
We used to go shopping at H&M, and now you can find the same clothes here. Everything is in stock, and the price is almost 10 times lower.
Another way of economizing is by selling your own clothes. People are putting their belongings on sale in order to manage the family budget.
Now people's salaries have decreased and people want to earn money in any possible way. If they used to throw away or give away these things, now they can take them to the second-hand shop and at the end of the season earn if the things get sold.
Yulia's store opened in 2018, and back then it was possible to sell 1 or 2 things a day. Over the past year, the number of buyers has exceeded 4,000, and demand is still growing.
That's all for today. The Eastern Europe Review will be back next week. I am Sergey Pelisa. Thank you for being with us. Please keep watching TV World and stand with Ukraine.